Recording is giving a slow start. Warm up the recording. Hi and welcome everybody to the SUSE QE Tools team. Today, first Friday of the month, as usual, I would like to the roadmap, which includes what we did within the tools team within the past months, but then also the plan going forward. So to take a look into what we have done, how we work. How we work. And then we can select closed within last 60 days. Just that to just 30 days, I think, since the last, more or less. Let's see. And then let's take a look. So we have overall we have 75 tickets solved, which is nice. So that means the average is 0.5 tickets per calendar day in that period. We see that there are multiple feature requests repeated. That is because sub-projects. We can also build shortly by project. Have an overview event where we spend our effort, and you can see that 29 tickets, which is also the biggest share, the infrastructure. Short of that, 25 in OpenGA projects, 5 related to actual tests. That could be support tickets or also adjusting tests when observed some problem which is related to our work, like maybe also related to structure or to changes in backend behavior. We have 9 general QA tickets, 2 in QM, QA collaboration, 5 SUSE QA specific tickets. So going by those projects, what we see is that we had some HTTP response alert tweaking, which actually allowed us now to monitor HTTP 500 errors. And we then promptly received an alert about that, which is like not really critical, but just there were some 500 errors, and I wanted the team to look into that. Related to that, I would like to shortly show one more thing, which is our monitoring page entry. And you might know that already, which is computing the overall availability. That takes only some seconds. Yep, and you can see that the overall availability is 99.22%. What does that mean? That means that according to our definition, we receive responses to HTTP requests, like you go to OpenGA SUSE/tests, but also this note is that we are measuring the time that it takes to get a response, and if it's taking too long, in the case like more than, let's say, 500 milliseconds for initial loading of the page and maybe more than 1 or 2 seconds to load the page completely, the test overview page, then we don't consider the system responsive enough, so wouldn't count for the availability. So in 99.22%, we still have a responsive enough system, so you can actually reach the server, you get a response, the response is valid, it is no 500 error or something, but also then response within a certain time. And derived from that, we also monitor all the parameters which I mentioned, and if there's any violation which would endanger that number, like with a lower threshold, then when this would turn orange or red or something, then we are looking into those problems. This is why we have this one alert here. Other issues. There had been, for example, typing issues on PowerPC for workers, and I mean that's something that can occur, especially if workers are overloaded. we do monitor those workers, but we found that there are some periods where there's like super high spike of the system load, and during those times we could actually see that tests misbehave. We found multiple ways to improve that. I mean, a very like a trivial mitigation is that we actually number of instances that we run on those hosts, but we always want to keep the balance because we also want to make efficient use of the hardware. So going too low would also mean that we don't have enough instances available and hardware. So we want to find a good middle ground. But there's also a feature developed related to that, and I will come to that later because it's then related to a project related to what we initially observed in. What else? Well, there are some more alerts and problems happening, but also some improvement work. I just showed you the improvements of our metrics. So both of those regarding the response time and the patient code then ended up in this one aggregated chart with a number. And there is also one other story block that we work on, an epic, which is about making efficient use of our hardware, which includes for the hardware that we want to use and that we expect that they are used, make sure that it's like fully used up to capacity. Detect if there are any machines which are running, but there is actually no real workload running on those. But also, for example, here, check for machines which are marked as unused in Rectables, our inventory management system, but you can still ping those machines because they should not be powered on at all. That's why they are marked as unused, where we implemented a check like that. Similar cross-check, which sorry, it actually goes the other way around. So first we made an initial check to actually cross-check which machines are marked as unused but still pingable, and then based on that, based on the initial concept, we implemented an automatic check which runs like weekly now. So every week now we would check for all the machines and see if any of those are pingable when they should be. Over time, we also managed to increase resources, like more or less continuously. We're looking for more resources. In that last period, we managed to get a hold of more S390 KVM resources. So we have additional OpenGA worker instances there, making sure that we are coping with the ever-growing backlog of tests, but also making sure that the tests which are scheduled are maybe finishing a bit quicker. Then there was an issue with a compromised root password, which we handled so far. Yeah, we also ensured that IPv6 is now fully working. In that case, we have this from time to time. This is still, like you can also see that here, that's also related to IPv6. We ensure that this is properly usable. In this case here, this is about OpenGA. So if you would now go to OpenGA.org, assuming that you have a properly set up IPv6 setup, then you will see that this machine is reachable over IPv6. And if I would start the developer tools browser, then I will be able to. So much about infrastructure. Let's take a look into OpenGA project. So let's take a look. What's interesting? Oh yeah, we have this internal code editor, which is used in OpenGA Web UI in particular for displaying source code, but also to allow to edit something like job template. And that one, as you can see from the ticket, there's like a specific version upgrade that was requested here based on what Depender-bot automation tried to do automatically. Well, being a major version jump that wasn't working without needing manual changes, but When we evaluated the situation, we also considered alternatives, and we actually switched to an alternative, which I think is case editor. So now, if you would take a look on, let's just pick any recently finished test like this one here. And if you then display the source code view of individual test modules, now this editor looks slightly different and it has additional features like folding. So for example, you can zoom all the way and collapse body here, no, the which we got for free when with the editor. But now we also made, I mean, the primary goal was to ensure that we have a properly updated and up-to-date dependency JavaScript. I was looking into OpenQA Worker native on SV90, and you can also see that we started first with a time box, and then we went on because it showed to be feasible to run OpenQA Worker natively on S390. So that allows that now we could run OpenQA Worker instances directly on S390, because so far it's like we have worker instances running on another architecture connecting to libvirt hypervisor on running on S390 or ZVM instances. And now we could actually run those worker instances natively. I'm saying could because the primary purpose of that would be native QEMU KVM testing. But that isn't that straightforward because, as you might imagine, if you know SV90 mainframes, there's not necessarily a concept of having a primary display adapter. I can configure some, but I tried it out so far to run a basic QEMU KVM test on SV90, and the test worked. It started and it showed kernel and init.rd output on the serial prompt, but nothing on the VNC output of configured display adapter. So that needs to be looked into more details to, just run the standard QEMU test case. But right, and then I mentioned the typing issue on PowerPC. You can see the start of the subject here, and now the interesting part is that we came up with I think, a good idea about making sure that we're not overloading the worker with many OpenQA jobs picked up or worked on it. And one approach is there were multiple ideas. One idea is still pending is, for example, of the video encoder, which doesn't have like native acceleration support on, unlike. But another feature is to say only pick up new jobs if new load, or rather I should say system load, below figured threshold. And that had been working quite nicely, so that, for example, let me show you an example of one of the power machines. So we have, for example, diesel and manual. Let's take a look at one better there. And I'm looking for system load. System load, not just last hours, but something like last 30 days. And what you can see is that for the past, okay, it doesn't look that severe. I think because I was wrong last 9 days, because that. Take a look. Yeah, last 9 days. Yeah, here you can also see the effects. You can see that, for example, during this period, the system load is rather high, like in a range of 50. That means a lot of processes wait for execution. And when we have time critical execution, like virtual machine running, and you type some characters and it needs to receive the characters in the buffer over the VNC space, this might lead, or it does lead And now what we have is the same amount of worker instances, in some case even more than before. Well, if the load is already high, we're applying a limit of 10, then don't pick up new. You can see that in effect, I think we enabled it here. You can see that there's still some smaller spikes, but they are not problematic because they are not sustaining for long. But you can see that, for example, in this block, most of the time we are like staying really near to that limit, because if the load is already high, maybe because there are already 10 virtual machines running, executing OpenGA jobs plus video encoder and all the background, not picking up jobs until the load decreases. I think this is really helpful because both it ability when typing issues as well as making sure that we don't need to unnaturally reduce the amount of it. And actually, we are applying a default in already, but for those power we have reduced that from the default of 40 down to 10. Another example is here. Actually, we don't problematic spikes here. Maybe because we were already running with around the third that we have of. Take a look here. Yeah, then you can also see all those dashed lines are areas where there were problematic instances. And now you can see that during this time, I mean, there were still 2 spikes because I was on more instances. No, not. And since then, I have reduced it, and you can see that the load is limited around 10 with spikes got 20. That's the limit in effect here. In effect for the long time averaging line. Now the next one, thank you Jan Bayer, who quickly worked on that yesterday evening. I just added the past days upgrade 15.6 task because now I guess I can say thanks to Lubosh and others, container being available now. So you know, Deep is already like in the process of being going stable. And yep, thanks Fabian for fixing the an actual container which wasn't available yet. After that is now available, I said like, okay, now we can try out upgrading Leap 15.6 partially, starting with the infrastructure where we have say less critical requirements on the performance and switching our CI and testing the CI infrastructure before we actually switch to production A workers. So those will come in the what else? Documentation for RSD worker region, location, and data center. So that might also be, it says OSD workers, but it's also relevant in general. So let me just reference the OSD document related to that. If you want to assign jobs to workers, then as usual, as in before, you can do something like define worker class desktop, or additional ones, and select in your tests according binding to worker class. Additionally, what we did is, I mean, this is basically a convention because you can set anything as a worker class, any string. But what you can also do is additionally qualify workers for informational purposes, for example, region or location tags based on company conventions. So here we come up with some fancy example, planet Earth and Antarctica and location my station. And with that, for example, you could say, I need those tests to run on a desktop worker class, but only when it's on the continent Antarctica or on location my station, because maybe you need access to a resource which is only available in that network, or for performance reasons that you want to make sure that all tests of a certain cluster run near to a resource which is only available on that location. How does that look like in our kernel structure for OpenGate? There we have that also. Documenter. Let me see. Oh, sorry. Find it. Well, yeah, never mind. I don't want to show the details of. Oh, right. Sorry. Now I know. People. Yeah. So worker classes. We use region, data center, and location. One example be region Prague for Prague located workers, region Nuremberg for Nuremberg located workers. But within that region, we have multiple data centers. For example, data center 7, where the Prague 2 application is running, and data center Franken campus, Nuremberg 2, which is actually F Franken basement. So with that, you know exactly where the stuff is running. You can for debugging purposes, or you are able now to find to certain regions, data centers, locations based on specific testing. So about that. Oh yeah, test parameterization for GitHub description comments mentioned as part of CI. In the past, it was already possible in a pull request GitHub to say OpenGA please clone this or that job for verification. Additionally, now it's possible to further qualify that clone command by customizing settings. So for example, you could say, this is my test, clone that test and run it for verification, but additionally that like foo bar. For example, in a live pull request merge, you can see that this was an example where Martius asked OpenGA, like, OpenGA, please clone this test, but set test var 1 and test var 2 to bar. And then test var 1, test var 2, and then we see test var 1, test var 2. So this test was created by OpenGA automatically from GitHub by just mentioning a shortened clone command in the GitHub description. Next plan related to that is that actually to allow that all in comments for selected trusted members. So that, for example, if you're part of the trusted reviewer group on a repository, you could say, hey, OpenGA, for this pull request by somebody else, please also clone that job. So what else? Let's take a look in Yep, looked into some YAML vulnerabilities. They helped with the Velociraptor clients testing more machine, part of the data center. And that's it. And with that, I would like to go back to the page. And then we will take a look into the top level view for what's coming up as a plan, and then a bit more details about specific. Now, do you have any questions or comments so far about what was done? Okay, good. You still here, guys?
Yes, yes.
Fully awake. Thank you. Cool. So, top level view. So, that's unchanged. We are working on the migration set up in Prague in Nuremberg 3 while ensuring availability. As you saw, there had been more machines being set up in the new location. Now in Prague 2, we are down to machines, I think, which need to be handled by IT, connected, so that we have access. And after that, already in the plan are new machines, which we don't consider part of the migration, because then it's like, usual daily business where we have new testing with like an IBM Power 10 machine that would be put into day testing. Then we have the full version control awareness within OpenA. So one feature request I just demonstrated you related to that, so that we can tell OpenA, hey, please clone from this GitHub pull request, but with those changes. And upcoming is to also clone that from comments. And another feature I would like to show you now, which we have planned. And with those two, I guess we will actually be able to solve that. Hopefully, next month from now, we should have concluded that. Let me, now I made the promise. Let's see if we can actually find those feature requests. Yeah, so we have trigger OpenGate has mentioned in GitHub Commons part of automating thing with a trusted group of test maintainers only. So start with that for security reasons. So that's like, not anybody that can comment on a pull request from outside, maybe with malicious intent, owns some job and set some settings and then like arbitrary code. I mean, we have multiple security measures in place, including AppArmor, but they can't catch all, so there might be some potential attack vector that avoids that. And then oh yeah, it's actually in progress, which is create and maintain up-to-date version of test disty needles for web UI. And create and maintain means effectively that so that you can spawn an OpenGA instance, which doesn't have any tests set up locally, and that one should be able to automatically clone specified test and as necessary for the web UI, so that the workers can clone from that, so that you can see the source code, so that you can work with the needles as usual, like showing candidate needles and the actual needles, plus being able to editor get new ones. The worker and also audits can already work with Git checkout for years, but what we have been struggling with is a concept of how to make sure that we have like full native version control awareness and support within the web UI, so that also an admin doesn't need to have any manual setup outside just spawning open. Yeah, so much about the version control. Let's take a look into some other things. So I mentioned 500 errors. So also found like, okay, there's this one issue which we could actually fix. Then there's another issue where we couldn't really find the problem, but we identified like, okay, this is where we can improve the logging at least. So we have a handle on the situation so that not bothered with problematic crashy behavior of open. Well, then we already started with the Leap 15.6 upgrades. That's not related to Saga because that's like, that's like annual maintenance work, keep structure up to date. So we can see those tasks in our ready backlog, and the ones which are missing here, for example, upgrading the actual O3 and OSD workers and web UI. That's coming after that, currently in our staging backlog. Next. Then what else? Yeah, we have sometimes we have performance problems and availability problems on OpenGA SUSE team. So they're not that severe that they would actually degrade the number of availability that I've shown you, but still it confuses users, and I'm actually grateful to you if you bring that up in chat. Like I see that sometimes during chat, in particular doing something like, let's say, the usual European lunch time, then come up with a question like, hey, is OpenGA SUSE QE down? And then somebody else responds like, no, it's not down, but super slow and sluggish. And yeah, I observe the same. So we are trying to understand the problem, and we really struggle with that. For the could be that is actually gdump, that's Postgres dump for database backup, interfering with operation. Gdump doesn't block access, but it's fading the performance as it's causing at least some of the problems that we see regarding response. So we want to look here in particular into handling of pgdump. Another thing that picked up to address the same problem area is trying Nginx. And OpenGA OpenSUSE.org already runs on Nginx for a rather long time, I think longer than a year already, without problem. So we do support Apache and Nginx as a web proxy, no problem. But now we find that the time is right to need to do that on all because of the repeated unresponsiveness, and we think we could also tackle that there, or at least we can rule out one potential fault there by migrating to it. It might be that with Nginx we observe the same problem, then we at least know that it's not the fault of the web proxy. What else? We are consolidating OpenGA related containers because over time there had been multiple containers which turned out to be not anymore. Something like I-base container for our CI infrastructure, which are also others are also like development containers which want to contribute there. You might find in the so we are streamlining that, cleaning up, making sure that containers that we have and that we document are also actually the ones which are usable and useful and not redundant. We're also working on the backlog limits checker. So you might know the backlogs the browser window. Actually, let's just open the backlog. So you might know this backlog status checker with demo page looking like that, where this is parsing status on progress of fork, the red line instance checks and also responding there with dot comments. And what had at a time with differing results was that for pull requests, one would be able to see a preview of the page, that you're able to evaluate what's happening before merging changes. And now, Liv and Janis are working on that, making sure that this properly works with the workflows of I have my fork, I create a pull request from my fork to the main repository. So much about progress. Let's back. So yeah, a bit more about IPv6, a bit more about monitoring that might crop up, and we're also planning like an in-place workshop in the SUSE office in the fiscal year. And then what comes next is, yeah, I covered the section. Comes next is stories related to OpenGA. So the main operating system that we as a base for operation is Deep, which I know already for a long time is effectively Deep plus package hub. So we know that OpenGA can run on sleep as well as on sleep, but just not pure sleep. So that's why one task, which is a spike solution, say what would be necessary to submit all necessary dependencies. Luboš?
Yeah, just one concern, and you've probably seen it already with the Chromium, right? And the Chromium.
Yeah.
That really concerns me because I would love to have the situation staying the same way, even with Leap 16, that we would be a base. But that implies that we have to have Chromium driver because you depend on it.
Yeah, that's a point. Although, I mean, there are multiple approaches that we can take. Actually, there is some movement now regarding build, or might be.
Scott Reeves promised me that he will be his team. One person, I think, the Firefox maintainer is looking into it, trying to help, but
Okay.
it's
Cool.
uneasy.
That's cool. It's great news. But I must say we don't need that for life. So if it turns out that we don't have that as a dependency, we will have a way out. And one way out would be to say like, well, we could like, I don't know, support a development environment on Tumbleweed only. I mean, on Tumbleweed we already fully support that. As you could say, maybe that specific part of UI related testing is easier to handle on Tumbleweed. We could also work with getting that dependency from elsewhere, not having that in proper official Leap repositories, because it is only about running the UI tests. So you can still run it as production completely fine. You don't need a browser to run OpenGA, right? That's the concept for how some Selenium-based UI.
Understood. Thank you.
Right. There's a sibling story, which is current OpenGA auth audience and dependencies updated in SLE and PackageHub. So how do those differ? This one is pure SLE and a spike solution timebox. So this is like explore the concept. What would it mean? How far can we go? And that one means to actually ensure that we have OpenGA auth audience dependencies is updated in PackageHub, meaning without needing an extra development repository. So that on SLE and PackageHub, you can just call zipper in OpenGA and it will install OpenGA and that will work. But it's an older version and we don't have an automated process yet to ensure that we consistently and continuously update those versions by zipper. We do that for Tumbleweed. So if you're in Tumbleweed, you're getting not the development version, but let's say a 2-day-old version of OpenGA, which in cases, I mean, is completely fine or actually the very same. So you don't need any development repositories there. And what we would like to do from factory, then submit after you that as another staging ground for testing, stabilization, submit it into PackageHub, and from that you can also use that as a staging ground to say, and now put it into an actually module as required by, let's say, as required by the procedure. I mentioned JavaScript stack updates, so upgraded the editor. Another component is Bootstrap. Also here, we have an explicit ticket about that. If it's like a smaller task, then we just handle that in automatic requests, which in best case are just tested and merged automatically. If you're more interested in that topic, I'll take a look at the recording from last week's workshop when Marius presented the concept, how Dependabot is used to update the node modules. And we decided as a process within our team to normally just handle that within pull requests, but sometimes if the work there seems to be more work necessary, as in the case of the editor, as in the case of Bootstrap, supporting a major version bump where we need to adjust more locations of code to be able to upgrade Bootstrap to the version, then we have a separate ticket about that. Then yeah, then the efficient use of hardware. Already mentioned that we have this automatic check are marked as unused, but are still pingable. And this one is about machines which are actually in our monitoring, but then ended up in not running any workload. And what we want to detect is that there's too low system usage over time. Like the machine is just there, it's just idling. Those are really good candidates to repurpose or maybe increase the amount of work that we assign to that special. Also, now that's an old ticket. You can see that because it's 5 digits, like multiple years old, and now coming up because I want to make sure that we still have the resources to actually look into still valid, old but older open work that was planned. And one is for the full OpenGate test development and allow to maintain OpenGate and administrate that from a browser without the need of a local terminal. So think of a Chromebook. You can do that, or just for convenience when say you have any environment where you can't use the terminal or don't want to use the terminal. And that, of course, has some requirements, in particular regarding support for version control. So that's why it's linked to that saga about version control awareness. In some ways, it's already quite possible, but maybe not so easy to understand how that would work. So this is why this part is also about demonstrating how that works, maybe provide training videos, maybe update the documentation. Also, what else? More machines, and I would say that's about it. Any questions or additions I'd like to bring? Oh, okay.
I have a question unrelated to what you presented. I'm not sure if it's the right time to ask or not.
And because there are no related questions, now is the time for unrelated questions. So please bring them up.
Awesome. The boring thing is the test catalog initiative. I was actually chatting with Pet Czerwinka the other day, and he suggested, he mentioned something what sounds like a good idea. So adding another optional parameter to assert script run, something like, a test name or definition or something like this. So if we could add it in the OpenQA test modules, as I mentioned, optional one, so we won't be forcing this on anyone. If we add it, then we could actually have some sort of resemblance of test coverage. I wonder if how you see it, or what you think about it.
I think it's a good idea. There's already a parameter called fail message. So that message would be printed if the test fails to know exactly what does it mean that it fails, what test, maybe there's some cryptic script that is executed, and with the fail message you can actually describe like what does that mean, because maybe that means that the kdump feature is effective. And you could also do the other way around to say with a message which is printed regardless of the result, or on success you could say we verified this with that.
Good idea. Okay, awesome. I will check it out, that code. Thanks a lot, Oli.
Fail under message if you look for that in the help office.
Yep, sure. Thank you.
Cool. Anything else by anyone? Nope. Okay. Next week there is still a free slot for the workshop. I know that this is also like what call a bridge day, because seems like we lost everybody in time. just for talking about what would come next as the topic. Regardless, if anyone else here still here or listening to the recording next week after a public holiday in countries on Friday, there's still a free slot, so you're welcome to pick that up. And if nobody comes up, we might want to skip that. After that, I'm inviting you to join us for a talk about the OpenQE ecosystem led by Santiago Zarate and me. So happy to. So with that, thank you for attendance and hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.